I had been reading some of the LAPD murder teletypes, and I saw a couple of murder cases where the victims had been strangled with a bra. That's relatively unusual in this area. And when I became aware...
Local law enforcement agents out here, dozens of them, FBI, transportation workers, they're all here to begin an excavation. They're looking for the remains of Roger Madison. He's a teenager who disappeared back in
25 years since a pair of lovers smothered patients at a West Michigan nursing home where they worked. Now, the state parole board is about to decide if one half of the murderous pair...
Search warrant on his place in Austria. They found business cards with LAPD officers' names and numbers. They found photographs with him with police officers. And his MO was to go through the proper channels through the police station like he did here in the United States. Get around.
Welcome to Bloody Shed Lounge.
Welcome to Bloody Shed Lounge. I'm Michelle.
And I'm Charles.
Thank you for joining us as we discuss...
We're going to talk about jobs.
Specifically, jobs that serial killers have held. Do you know why this fascinates me?
I would love to know why.
Well, I go through these phases of what do I think about during insomnia or, alphabetizing things to fall asleep. One of the things that crosses my mind when I can't sleep is, what do serial killers do during the day, or what are their career choices? How do they make ends meet? I find it interesting because...
Because even serial killers need to pay the bills?
Even serial killers need to pay the bills. So how do they get by? How do you not know that the guy down 2 cubes over is a serial killer? Most people say he was the nicest guy. He was just kind of the guy next door. A lot of them, not all of them. But what are the jobs that they do? How do you know if you're working next to a serial killer?
And I'm sure they can probably multitask. I mean, it's not just a job. Sometimes I bet they probably use the job to some benefit for their extracurricular activities.
Well, absolutely they do. Not every serial killer uses their work to kill, but a lot of them, they do sort of incorporate the opportunities that the job has into killing people.
Okay. You know what I think this really is about, though? That creepy air conditioning guy that came over.
I'm a little reluctant to talk about it yet, but yes. So we've been living actually in the Bloody Shed Lounge because the AC is out. And it might seem ridiculous to people that live in other parts of the country where it might still be snowing. But in Arizona, by April, it's quite warm. So you need AC to survive. It's typically 90 degrees in your house. We have been dealing with these AC issues, and there was one of the repairmen that was out here gave me a vibe. I don't know how to explain it. I guess it's just an intuitive feeling.
He was shifty-eyed.
A little shifty, just a little too
Is it
chatty.
The same guy that I talked to when I watched the house for you?
I think so.
The older guy or that younger?
I don't want to say any names, but yeah. So
it was Bob.
It was Bob. So I was thinking also how people that can get, like, they're welcome into other people's houses, and that's an odd feeling, especially as a woman here alone. And I've had a lot of workers coming into the house lately because I've had a lot of projects going on, and because I'm paranoid and obsessed with crime, I'm always thinking, what if this is the new serial killer?
Jesus, you need to get your air conditioning fixed quick.
I know. I really do. I agree. I've been living in the Bloody Shed Lounge for going on 2 weeks now.
I don't envy it.
While I love it, it's also full of spiders and weird vibes. Like, I've had really weird dreams.
So, you know what? I bet you it's the spider venom that's in your veins. It's coursing through your veins.
I thought I had spider venom in my blood always.
But now you've got too much. There has to be
much.
like a 10-90 split.
Yes, I agree. Maybe something like that.
So tell me about one that serial killer out there who you looked up after all of this staying awake at night, overthinking.
Well, it's curious. It's really interesting to me how coworkers can develop a really strong bond, and also there's that fine line between love and hate. Very quickly, you can develop a fine line between love and hate, especially at work. And I have a story about Gwen Graham and Kathy Wood, who met in Michigan working at the same nursing home together in the 1980s.
Okay, is this totally gonna like reinforce my whole no one should go to a nursing home?
Well, perhaps, yeah, actually. So Gwen moved to Michigan from Texas and met 24-year-old Kathy Wood. She was the nursing aide supervisor at the Alpine Manor nursing home. Prior to that, Kathy had a really unhappy life at home. She was married to Ken Wood and had been a stay-at-home mom where she felt sort of, I think, useless at home and depressed. During that time, she gained a lot of weight. She went from just a regular figure to, at the time when she started working at Alpine Manor, she was 450 pounds.
Okay.
Right. So she was unhealthy and unhappy. But when she started her job at Alpine Manor, there was a really big social scene there. And most of the social scene...
There's a really big social scene
with the workers, among the workers.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. And it was a big... Most of the women that were in this social scene were lesbians. And they would go out after work to the gay bars and host parties. And so there was a kind of a social clique. And Kathy very quickly sort of became like the queen bee among this social scene.
Okay.
And then when Gwen showed up, they were immediately developed a relationship. Over the course of a month, it turned into a love affair.
Oh.
And which lasted for 9 months. So in 1986, Kathy asked for a divorce from Ken, and she left with her daughter. And after after Ken moved out, that's when things really became serious between Gwen and Kathy.
Okay.
But during that relationship, as part of their bonding, they started murdering the patients at the nursing home.
Did you just say as part of their bonding?
As part of their bonding. Right.
Okay.
Yeah. So then in 1987 is when they committed the first murder of 5 at the nursing home. And their first murder was Marguerite Chambers, and she was 60 years old, and she was suffering from Alzheimer's. And while Kathy stood as a lookout outside of her room, Gwen smothered her with a washcloth.
Okay, I'm going to be the morbid asshole here and say you couldn't find something bigger than a washcloth?
Well, I don't know. And it was a bit of a game. There's some dispute over why they did this and how it all started. There was something said originally that they were playing this sort of game where they wanted to spell out the word murder based on the patients' names. And then that didn't work. So they just kind of kept going.
Okay, so poets they were not.
Right. Yeah. So they just kind of kept going, and they went on to kill 4 other women at the nursing home. And this was all during this.
So 4 people. So they got as far as murder.
Right. Yeah. And it was during this 9-month relationship. And then after they broke up, a lot of people really kind of feel like Gwen was sort of sucked Kathy into this to use it over her and blackmail her to keep her in the relationship. And it's also said vice versa. So it's not really clear.
So one's blaming it on the other as they were my bad influence.
Right.
I wouldn't have murdered if it wasn't for them.
Exactly. So after they broke up, Gwen moved back to Texas, and what's even more frightening, got a job working with children, with infants, taking care of infants.
Did she continue her murder spree?
Not that we know of. No,
Okay.
not that we know of. But
Okay, so she just had it out for old people and bad poetry.
I really think it was just sort of a toxic relationship.
Or,
and
I guess it's
game,
murder bingo. Is that what it is? Murder bingo.
kind of maybe something like that. And maybe they were like daring each other. It was definitely a toxic relationship. But after they broke up, Gwen moved back to Texas, and Kathy had confessed to her ex-husband, Ken, about all of this. And then in 1988, he went to the authorities and told them everything.
That's not a very faithful husband.
Well, they were divorced at that point.
Okay.
They were divorced. So they exhumed the bodies, because a lot of times what happens when older people die in these nursing home situations, they just assume that they died of natural causes. Right. So they exhumed the bodies, and then both women were arrested in 1988. But Kathy took a plea deal because she testified against Gwen. So Kathy got, I think, life, but she was eligible for parole in 2005, which I don't think she's received yet. But Gwen got life without parole.
Okay.
So this was a story of serial killers working together that met at work and then proceeded to kill together, which is actually really rare, very rare.
Teamwork is really important.
Yeah,
at the
right.
work.
Like, what are those the morale? Like, what do they call that? Those
morale builders or team building
exercises.
That's what this was. Team building exercise.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
I mean, the team keeps getting a little smaller, but
I think that the nursing home ended up being sold to someone else, and they changed the name because of the bad reputation.
Okay, but it's probably in the same building, right?
I don't know.
I'm not sure. I hope who cares about the name as long as they changed the linen, right?
Yeah, I'm not sure. But yeah, interesting case.
Interesting. The thing is I think that you would think it's pretty random, but there are actually specific jobs / types of jobs that serial killers tend to go into. And I looked up a few of these jobs, and I think the three things that kind of become a trend is obviously jobs like the ones that they had, jobs that give them access to people. Mm-hmm. So that would be police, religious officials, general labor.
Jobs where you can have control over others, you think?
Right. Well, I think that's another option is, and I think a lot of these overlap, but I think trusted professions, that gives you control, right? Police, that's generally speaking, I don't trust police, but it's a trusted profession.
Right.
And yes, it also gives you control. Military, religion, doctors.
Lawyers.
Right. And then there's also, of course, the ones that I think most people think of is not as common is the ones with anonymity and mobility, right? The long haul truck driver who is out of the state before anyone found the body.
I think that we have an assumption that truck drivers are sort of creepy, and maybe a lot of that is from the media or movies we've seen.
Well, I mean...
And there are definitely serial killer truck drivers, for sure, but not as many as you would think.
Well, you know what? There are serial killer trucks. Did you never see Maximum Overdrive?
Right.
Okay, maybe that doesn't fit into our...
Oh, nerdy. Okay.
So, I mean, the top jobs based on different professions, whether it's professional, skilled, unskilled. I mean, in professional, it would be police and security, military, and these religious officials.
Isn't it shoe salesman, or that's a different category?
Well, shoe salesman, that's skilled category, and it's kind of creepy how many shoe-involved serial killers, as far as jobs. My theory is it must have something to do with a rampant shoe fetish thing going on.
Do you know who was a shoe salesman?
Remind me. I know.
John Wayne Gacy.
Of course.
John Wayne Gacy. Not only was he a shoe salesman, but he was Pogo the Clown. This guy starts out creepy and ends up super creepy.
Right. He's upping the ante. And he's not the only one. Ted Bundy worked as a shoe clerk.
He did?
Yeah, he worked as a
that.
shoe clerk and a bagger and a bus boy. I mean, I can go through. There's a few names here. Another Jeffrey Dahmer was an Army combat medic.
And a chocolate factory worker.
Right. That's just such a bizarre.
Right. I keep reading that he worked at a deli, but I don't know. I can't prove that. Yeah.
And if you need a reason to not sleep with a prostitute, I'll add a little scare factor. Eileen Wuornos.
Yeah.
Yeah, her when she was done with them, she would kill them.
Right.
So, if you need a...
That's like such the reverse of the prostitutes that were victimized.
Right.
She was the angry prostitute that victimized the Johns.
That's the last thing you ever want to run into, an angry
prostitute. She's a
prostitute.
podcast on her own.
She totally is. And, it runs the gamut. There's even down to people who just struggle to have any kind of job. Ed Gein. Mm-hmm. He was a carpenter and a handyman in odd jobs when, he wasn't like hermiting on the farm with dead lamp people.
Right. I mean, talk about creepy. That guy was a lot of movies and characters have been based on his crimes and his fetishes.
And then even Richard Ramirez, he worked at a hotel.
He worked at a Holiday Inn in El Paso when he was a teenager, but because he had a pass key, he could get into all of the rooms. He would burglarize the customers and the guests. And he also tried to rape or attempted to rape or did rape one of the female guests. And the husband caught him in the act and beat the crap out of him. But they decided not to press charges because they lived out of town and it was a different time. But it didn't stop him going forward.
And for him, that ended up just being training.
Right.
And of course, everyone imagines, the phrase going postal. So yes, okay, there was David Berkowitz worked for the Postal Service. He was just a letter sorter, though. He wasn't going door to door or anything like that. But that's another job that people imagine, but there's not that many postal workers.
They put you in a vulnerable position because you're dealing with people that see you every day and you feel comfortable with them and in some cases welcome them into your own home. Like BTK, Dennis Rader, one of his positions was installing security systems for ADT.
I know, that's just creepy. Again, that goes back to that whole security thing. But, so that's talking a lot about jobs where people were taking advantage of it as an opportunity to get into homes and things like that. But there's also people that use the job to their benefit as serial killers in a whole other way, like hiding the bodies. So, driving around LA, if it's not annoying and creepy enough fighting with that traffic, there's a chance when you're driving in LA, you might be driving over a body or two or three or five.
Really?
Yeah. So we'll start with June 1953. Stella Darlene Nolan. This is in Compton, which is a suburb area of the LA area.
Compton.
And she just poof off the map. And then 1956, August, and we're in nearby Azusa. And two teens go for a bike ride. Donna Lee Baker, Brenda Jo Howell, and they just poof, disappear. Their bikes were found, and here's a thing that we've seen a lot in stories that we've looked at, especially in the 50s and 60s. The police assumed they ran away.
Right.
So we keep going forward. Now, here's a weird thing. There's this gap all the way forward to 1968 when Gary Roche, he's living in Granada Hills. He's found shot in his home. Totally weird and random, unrelated thing. And then a month later, another teen gets in an argument with his dad and rides off on his motorcycle and poof, he's gone. In 1969, Donald Todd, he disappears. He's on a bike ride and he's last seen near a construction site.
Oh, and this is all in the same area?
It's all around in the area. So, yeah, Donald Todd disappears in Pacoima, a teen missing in Sylmar, Gay Rocher is
so
in
eventually
Granada
the police
Hills.
are sort of thinking, this isn't, they're starting to connect the dots here. Like,
No,
why are all
they
these
can't
people
connect a
disappearing?
dot for shit. No, the only break comes in March 5th, 1970. 3 teen sisters in Sylmar again, they just disappear. And the
Wow.
parents see a note that they had run away. Well, parents know their kids, and they're not buying this at all.
And
So-
typically 3 teen girls don't run away all
yeah,
together.
all 3 of them. Let's not mention the evidence of a break-in at the house, right? So they're freaking out, and then all of a sudden, 2 sisters come home. And before the cops could even get a search going for the 3rd sister, Mack Ray Edwards, 51 years old, walks into the LAPD, hands over a loaded gun, and says, I have a guilty conscience.
Now you do?
Now you do. And he confesses. So basically, he says a 15-year-old accomplice of his helped him out, and he told them to where to find the
I remember
3rd.
this guy. So what was his name? Like he had a...
His name was Mack Ray Edwards.
But what was he known as? Wasn't he known as... Did he have some sort of title?
Probably the Highway Killer. I don't
Was he the
remember.
Highway Killer?
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember what his nickname was. I don't think that he's in fact he's kind of a lesser known serial
Really?
killer. He's kind of forgotten. I don't think
Okay.
he has
I was
any
just curious
catchy
because I
name.
remember reading about him, but I couldn't remember if he was...
In fact, I think there was a police official or something years later that said, he's forgotten because, he didn't have a good name. He didn't have a catchy name. You got to have a catchy name if you're going to be remembered, right? Of course, nowadays they do their best to not mention the names. But so going back to the story a little bit, so it's 1970 and he admits that he's murdered people and he was hiding them. He was burying them under the freeway because he's working on the construction sites.
Wow.
And so
he would just show up maybe a little bit early before everyone else and get rid of the bodies?
Right. So like victim 1, Stella Darlene Nolan, that was the first one that they know of. This is in 1953. This is, oh my God, this is horrifying. So he strangles her, throws her off a bridge. He goes back that night and finds she's still alive.
Oh my God, that's
She had
terrible.
crawled off 100 feet and was just sitting there kind of dazed. So he goes over, pulls out his pocket knife and stabs her. And then, takes her to the construction site and there underneath or by the side of the road goes down 8 feet and buries her, throws rocks over her.
That is terrible.
And so he takes the cops to her body, and this is after he tried to show where there might be some bodies in the San Gabriel Mountains, but they couldn't find anything. So she was under the Santa Ana Freeway in Downey. And then he confessed to a couple of others, and so Edwards confesses to kidnapping and murdering Madison. He just lived 5 houses down. He even visited them. He was a family friend. And this is the one that had an argument, rode off on his motorcycle. Mack lures him into a orange grove, stabs him several times, and then throws him into a hole and fills it over.
This guy's a sicko. What was his motivation, do you think?
I have no idea. I don't know if there were any sexual things or not. But the weird thing is, so the story keeps dragging forward. In 2009, so when he was confessing to all of these, they couldn't connect it to people that were missing. So they just didn't do well enough research. There was one he said was under, I'm not remembering off the top of my head now, but under another freeway, and they decided not to dig because, well, it's California. I don't want to dig up the freeway. That's traffic.
Right. Well, and then too, it could create even damage to an existing structure that they wouldn't be able to repair.
Well, and exactly. So in 2009, work was being done on repairing on-ramp or something. Mm-hmm. So authorities went ahead and excavated. They had 4 cadaver dogs individually, separately point to a specific place. And so they dug, but after 5 days, citing safety concerns, they stopped. They never found the body.
Wow.
Even in 2011, they did it again for another person. So there's still bodies out there buried under the highway.
That's going to be so difficult for families of the victims when you know where potentially your family member is, but nothing can be done. That's
right.
Just, you never really get closure on that.
I mean, I guess they got a tiny granule of closure because he was caught. He was in 71. He was convicted, and so here's the thing. While he was in prison, he admitted that there may have been as many as 18.
I was going to say there's probably more because usually
because there's
when
that
they
weird gap
confess
between 56 and the 60s. There's like a 12-year gap that you just hung up the.
That happens sometimes though with serial killers where they do take a break and then they try to be normal. They might even have a somewhat normal family life where they're raising kids, they're focusing on a career, and then something snaps. Or often what I've seen is where they get attention, so, like an article will come out where it's an anniversary of a death that they're still trying and unresolved, like they're still trying to resolve this.
Mm-hmm.
And then it motivates them all over again. Or someone writes a book about it and it excites them and they start all over again.
Wasn't that BTK or
BTK did that?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, I mean, so to end his story, he hung himself. He got a hold of a television and power cord in 71 right after he was convicted and hung himself. So that was the end of his story. But the tragedy in that is he'll never help them find any of these bodies.
Selfish.
Yeah.
Selfish. Selfish jerks. But I was going to talk about, there's this other guy, Robert. I don't know a lot about him, but what's interesting to me about this serial killer, his name is Robert Lee Yates, and he was from Spokane, Washington, and he was the father of 5. He started out from 1975 to 1977. He worked as a correctional officer at a prison in Washington State. Then he went on to work. He went into the military and served for 20 years and actually became one of the highest ranking officers in the Army that you can. During all of this time, he was a serial killer and killed or had confessed to and was convicted of killing 13 prostitutes. And there's probably more. But here's where this guy gets even creepier. One of the prostitutes that he killed, he buried under his bedroom window at his family home.
Of his own?
At his own home where he had his wife and his 5 children. Now get this. He is serving his death sentence at the prison where he was a correctional officer in the 70s.
Whoa, that's insane.
Like totally went full circle for this guy.
Oh, they better put him in isolation or something.
I would imagine he is because he was a cop basically. But yeah, isn't that crazy?
That is totally crazy. Okay, so I've got one that kind of just to take that one and run with it. Like imagine, so gardener. A gardener is totally a job.
My gardener was here today. Don't creep me out about gardeners. No, I love my gardener.
But I have to tell this story.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, I'm totally going to ruin your... Well, you need to save some money anyway.
I love my gardener. No, don't creep me out.
Well, I have to. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Because this one has a little bit of a connection. Not much for me, but... a few years ago, I lived in Toronto.
Uh-huh.
And I remember, so my girlfriend and I, we'd wander all over the city, just trying different places. One of our favorite places to go check out like restaurants and stuff was a neighborhood called Church Wellesley Village. And it was the gay village. That was what locals called it. But there was always kind of a really weird undertow of conversation there because people were disappearing. And I even remember talking to one of the restaurant owners there was an Iranian restaurant that we would go in and eat. And
he mentioned you guys were talking to him about the disappearances.
Well, no, I don't even remember how the conversation came up at all. But he was talking about, you got to be careful out there. There's people in this neighborhood that are disappearing, and the cops ain't doing anything about it.
Wow.
So if finally years later, I'm back here in Phoenix, and last year it hits the news. So Bruce MacArthur. All of a sudden, there's this, shocking headline where they're having to, in the dead of January, go to houses where he worked as a gardener to get these giant flower pots in Toronto. There's a lot of, the fancier places will have these big flower pots.
Yeah, because you can't put anything in the ground. Maybe it gets too cold.
You can, but there's just so many things that you can grow there that looks beautiful when the snow thaws, but it's just one of the things.
A desert rat. I don't understand that environment.
Yeah, but so there's these giant flower pots. So imagine having to get 400-pound flower pots in the dead of January, and they're just frozen solid. They can't even dig them out. They have to X-ray them to find bodies in them.
Wow, that's bizarre.
Right. So there was kind of an interesting trend here. So I'll go through the victims, and you'll probably get sort of a theme of these. So Skandaraj Navaratnam, he was Sri Lankan. He was 40. He disappeared in September 2010. Abdul Basir Faisi was 42. He also disappeared December 2010. In fact, his family, they didn't even know he was gay until he disappeared, and that's how they found out. His wife thought he was avoiding her because she was in the middle of filing for divorce.
That's a vulnerable culture.
Right. Majid Kairan, 58, he disappeared in 2012, also a double life. His family had no clue. Sarush Mahmoodi, 50 years old, an Iranian refugee. He had a wife. Kirishna, oh my God, I'm not even sure I can say it. Kanagaratnam. Ooh, I think I did that pretty good. Sri Lankan refugee. His refugee claim was denied, and he was ordered to be deported. So police and his family didn't report him because they assumed he was in hiding.
Sure. It's kind of an invisible, they're sort of like under the radar and almost an invisible life.
Right.
A double life and an invisible life.
Right. And it goes on. There's three more. So Dean Lisowick, he was 47. He wasn't an immigrant or refugee, but he was homeless.
Age group. Other than being like culturally obvious, it's also a specific kind of age group, a demographic that he was targeting.
Right. And then Andrew Kinsman, 49-year-old. This one was the one that got things going as solving the problem. He disappeared in June 2017. By this point, all the gay community is up in arms, like, what the fuck? Somebody do something. People are disappearing.
Right.
So they finally catch a break when they see his red van, the killer's red van, on like pixelated, horrible security cam.
Was it like one of those murder vans, or just like?
Yeah, pretty much. It was like a red murder van. I haven't looked at a picture, but a van, and somebody was
not a mom van, but
this is a murder van. And in fact, he would make out with people in this van.
Mm-hmm.
So they
don't ever get in a van. If you don't know someone, don't get in the van.
I thought that was like Survival 101.
Well, we're going to make that part of our theme tonight. Don't get in the van.
Right. So, there are people who have lived to tell the tale of getting into a fucking red van. So, like, an example is Pietros Gromo. He made out with him in the red van, and all of a sudden, MacArthur grabs him by the neck, like shoves his neck down, and Gromo even says he was seconds away from snapping my neck. I really thought my neck was going to snap. He was lucky. He had just learned some like martial arts because he had gotten attacked.
Good for him.
So he used his elbow and got away and ended it there. And so they finally track this down because they had to cross-reference because they couldn't see anything in the video. They just knew it was a red van. They had to narrow it down. They got a lucky break because this last victim, Kinsman, had written a name in his calendar, right? So they cross-reference, and finally, January of 2018,
That's not that long ago.
No, they're watching his house. Well, we're watching where he lives. He lives up on the 19th floor of an apartment complex. In Toronto, everything is becoming giant apartment or condo towers. So he goes into the house, into his building with a Middle Eastern guy, and the cops close in as quick as they can. And I kid you not, they break down the door, go into the apartment, and he had already hogtied his next victim on the bed.
Wow. Was the guy roofied or just like it was part
I don't know if he was or not.
But they busted him.
Yeah, they caught him with somebody hogtied.
That guy's lucky.
But then the weird, creepy factor is, after this is when they assess, okay, he's a gardener, and they start going around to this, like...
How did he afford that apartment?
Oh, no, it's apartments are...
Oh, it wasn't super fancy. It was just regular?
Yeah, I mean, like almost everyone lives in condos there now because no one can afford the $500,000 homes or more.
I see.
But yeah, so he was working as a gardener and hiding the bodies. They found 6 bodies. He would chop them up into pieces and hide them in these flower pots. They found that in a nearby ravine at one house. They found all these bodies. He ended up pleading guilty to 8 murders, and he's out of our hair.
Wow, that's incredible. I mean, he really had a good cover to work as a gardener / serial killer.
Oh, that wasn't the only job he had. This guy, he looked so harmless and had this little beard that he actually worked as a mall Santa, too.
Mall Santa. I don't find mall Santas creepy at all. I'm being facetious. I think they're super creepy.
They are pretty creepy.
No offense to the mall Santas out there, but you're a little
we're gonna get an army
creepy.
of mall Santas angry at you.
No, I don't. Yeah, I don't like mall Santas. But I have my own personal reasons for not liking mall Santas.
Oh, you do you?
Well, it's my own fault, but my best friend and I, when we were children, would take advantage of the mall Santas to get as much candy out of them as we could. But as you approach the mall Santa again and again throughout the day, toward the end of the day, you start to realize Santa's kind of drunk.
Right.
And then toward the end of the day, when you're sitting on his lap and it's not feeling so jolly, it's starting to just feel a little creepy. But
right.
So I have a weird feeling about mall Santas.
I hate to bring this up. I feel it's like some sort of morbid name dropping. But you especially have a direct connection to a serial killer at his workplace.
A little bit. I don't know if it would be a direct connection, but we've met a serial killer, and we're not bragging about this. It's not something that we're proud of, but it's an unusual story. And
yeah, his name was Corey Morris, I believe. He was like the crackhead killer. It was a weird time because there were a lot of people in Phoenix that, like, there was the baseline killer.
There was like 3 sort of serial killers going on at the time. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was a strange time in Phoenix for sure. What year was that? Do you remember?
Whoa, wow. I want to say that was around 2003.
I think that sounds right. So there was this bar called Fat Cats on Grand Avenue, which is kind of an artsy sort of industrial area. And
right. It was, I mean, the bar was creepy. There was weird crap hanging. There was like, I liked it. We would go there for our friends' music shows, but there was like tricycles hanging from the ceiling, and the
owner looked like Sammy Hagar.
Like crackhead Hagar. I mean, Sammy.
No, he was like kind of heavy. He looked like that
that's
guy.
right.
He looked like the guy from what was that show? The show with all the celebrities, like where they play like tic tac. I don't know.
Okay, I know this show, like, Hollywood Squares.
He looked like the guy from that was always just Center Square. But anyway, you guys know who I'm talking about. So the bar was like really sort of vintage, dive, eclectic, but there wasn't a lot around it other than this bar. It's kind of it was an up and coming area.
I mean, there were plenty of, I don't know, sketchy folks and industrial.
It's a strange area. So this guy was the bouncer / doorman / karaoke director.
Yeah.
And that's how I met him, because our friend that would do performances there introduced us as he was the guy in charge of the soundboard and the karaoke.
Right, who has his own story about how he needed some equipment, and this guy said, "Oh, he might have something," and ran home to his trailer. And one can only imagine when he's like pushing bodies out of the way to get to this.
It's terrible. So, yeah, he was arrested, and he was living in the back of his aunt and uncle's house in a trailer in the Garfield area.
Yeah, and somebody said, I think it was a family member, had to check on things because there was a weird smell. Because he would get a prostitute. I mean, this is horrible to even say this, but he would kill them, use them for a while until he had to get rid of the body.
And then he was leaving their bodies around the Garfield area, which is Garfield's an area of Phoenix. It's a historic area of Phoenix. But yeah, so my only memory of him is meeting him, shaking his hand, and meeting him maybe twice, and then coincidentally, we were at that bar the night he was arrested.
Were we? Mm-hmm. Oh, I didn't realize we were.
We had gone out to eat Mexican food. It was my birthday. That's how I remember. Yeah, that's how I remember. It was my birthday, so we went to Los Dos. Then we went, and everyone said, "Where do you want to go after that?" And I said, "Fat Cats." And we were at Fat Cats, and then there was like all this sort of talk going on. It was like, Corey got arrested. He's a serial killer.
Right. I remember we were hanging out in that little tiny back area at one point, and I think people were having this weird conversation.
Yeah, things got weird, and it was because the bouncer, the door guy, didn't show up that night because he was arrested for being a serial killer. Yikes. And the first thing I said is, please don't anyone tell my mom. Because if my mom knows I'm hanging out in bars where serial killers work, she'll never sleep again.
Okay, maybe we'll insert something for your mom if she ever listens to this podcast.
Yeah,
please stop listening now.
Okay, Mom, now listen again. Yeah, my mom cannot know about this.
So, what's another job out there that? Oh, what about jobs that you have had that could be a serial killer?
Well, if I had to pick a job as a serial killer, I think I would be a poisoner.
A poisoner? Wait, as a job?
This wasn't in what we were going to talk about.
I'm trying to find a segue.
What are you talking about?
I was hoping you would say journalist.
Oh, journalist? What?
You were a journalist once.
I thought you meant as a serial killer.
Right.
Okay, yes. I would be I don't know. Yeah, I would be a journalist.
You have made angry people mad.
I have made angry people mad. That is a fact.
Let's try that again. You have made famous people mad as a journalist.
Let me remind people, this is the Bloody Shed Lounge. We've had a couple of cocktails.
Well,
We're having a good time, and we're here to discuss stories that interest us and hopefully interest you. But yes, at one point I did dabble in journalism, not as a serial killer.
Well, so all right, let's talk about a journalist.
Here we go.
All right.
Drum roll, please. I can't roll my tongue. Drum roll, please.
All right. Jack Unteweger was a journalist.
Oh, thank you.
All right, excuse me while I wipe the tears of laughter away. Jack,
for this sad story.
Yes, it was just very heartbreaking. Jack Unteweger was a journalist. He was born 1950, and his story. We're just going to talk about a few pieces of this because his story is an episode on its own. It's a long, crazy story, but the part that most fascinates me is in 1991. So Unteweger worked for an Austrian magazine, and they sent him to Los Angeles to report on police attitude towards sex workers. So he conducts a bunch of interviews, goes on a few police ride-alongs, and he was just doing his job as a reporter for an Austrian magazine.
And where was he staying? In Hollywood?
So he was staying in LA, and he was staying at a hotel, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
He also was meeting with the sex workers that he was doing the story about. Not to interview them, though. No, he killed them.
He killed them?
He killed them. Yeah. Shannon Exley, Irene Rodriguez, Peggy Booth are no longer with us because they let a known murderer into the U.S.
That's right. Was he acquitted or he had served his time?
This is the weird, fucked up thing about this story. So in 1974, he strangles an 18-year-old girl, Margaret Schaefer, with her own bra. He strangles her.
Where was this at?
This is in Austria. And he gets thrown in prison, and he's in Austria. And to pass the time, he becomes a writer, a really good writer, apparently. Poetry, short stories, everything. They made a movie out of his autobiography. And
they believed he had been reformed,
right?
Because of his talent.
Because of his talent, they lobbied for him to be released. Even a Nobel laureate Austrian, I think her name was Elfriede Jelinek.
So he's very famous. He's a very famous writer at this point, and is reformed, believably.
Yeah.
Unbelievably. But he's reformed,
right.
And has a lot of advocacy behind him to be released.
Right.
And he's released.
Yeah. After the minimum 15 years for murder in Austria, he gets out, and it's 1990. And he becomes a media personality. He's a journalist for the ORF, which is like Austria's version of like the BBC. And he also goes to Austria, Czech Republic, and kills women. Even covered his own crimes. Reported.
Sicko. But of course,
crimes.
It's unknown. I mean, no one knows.
Yeah, no one knows.
It's undetected.
No. But, well, some cops suspected, but they couldn't find anything that tied him to the crimes.
And he makes it to America.
Right. Well, he's to back up to his personality. He was a very convincing, extravagant, out there, flamboyant,
intellectual.
Well, let's call it an emotional chameleon. That's probably a better way to put it.
That's a good.
And like just to look at pictures of him, he dressed like a cross between a cowhand and a Mississippi preacher, I guess you could say.
I like that.
Yeah, think
reference.
White snakeskin boots. White coat, gold chains, a Navajo vest.
He wasn't subtle.
No, white hibiscus print coat. And I mean, he was a 70 rock star.
And he had like some
pimp.
Like really big. I noticed that you were sort of, without realizing you were doing it, you were doing this thing with your hands, with your eyes, like sort of spreading your eyes like this. And he had like really wide, big, sort of almost childlike eyes.
Yeah. Yeah, and throwing a little bit of narcissism, he was like a 70s rock star / pimp kind of thing going on, and he was just out there and apparently convincing because an Austrian magazine commissioned him for a trip to the U.S. in 1991 to write on crime in Los Angeles. So he stays at the Cecil Hotel. You know the Cecil Hotel?
I'm familiar with the Cecil Hotel. That's also where Richard Ramirez was reported to have stayed. Richard Ramirez, the
Night Stalker.
Right. So, and that hotel has a lot of stories.
Right. And I mean, this is probably fresh
which is why he wanted to stay there because of.
It was only 7 years before that Ramirez had been arrested, so it's fresh in his mind.
Right. That's
probably.
why he wanted to stay there as part of the writing process.
Fan club. Ugh, gross. So he basically was crawling down the fire escape at night after riding around with a cop to, just see what their day is like. And he goes down the fire escape and finds sex workers and kills them. And he goes back to Austria. He didn't get caught. He was finally chased down in Austria and escaped to Florida. And they finally catch him in Miami, Florida. This is 1992. So they extradite him back to Austria. He stands trial there for 11 murders. In the time that he was out, he killed like 7 women. And
unbelievable.
Yeah. The thing that blows my mind is you would think that they would learn from their mistakes because we did it ourselves. So Jack Henry Abbott was somebody in the U.S. that pretty much the same thing. He was a convicted murderer, and he also became an author. He was in for like manslaughter, forgery, bank robbery, and Norman Mailer was one of the people that lobbied for getting him out, saying he's not a murderer, he's an artist. And yeah, he was released in 1981. 6 weeks later, he stabs a waiter to death because he wouldn't let him use the damn bathroom. So the guy said, well, let's go out back. You can pee in the alley. So he went out in the alley and stabbed him. So yeah, he was caught a month later in Louisiana. But
there's a fine line between art and murder.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. It seems like in some cases.
Well,
there's very passionate people, but these are sociopaths that are just they're using their charisma and their talent to sort of evade and also just fool people into believing in them.
Well, why can't these psychopathic people just stick to being lawyers and CEOs and just stop there? Right?
Well, I don't know. Ask your current president.
Oh, okay. Good point.
No politics. So we've enjoyed our topic tonight, and we hope that you've enjoyed listening. We hope you'll visit us at bloodyshed.com. Check us out on Facebook. Share us and give us reviews, because that really helps us more than you know.
It helps us get a job where we don't have to work with serial killers.
That's right. And we can give you even more podcasts, and we hope that's what you'll enjoy.
We hope that's what you need.
We hope you'll need us.
And
we hope you'll develop a codependency with us.
And our intro and our outro music is H is for Horse on the album Phoenixotica by
Moonlight Magic. You can check them out on Spotify and sloperecords.com. And we personally love them and appreciate them so much.
They are awesome. And this is Bloody Shed Lounge, and Michelle is going to annoy me with this little sound she does. There it is, because I won't get her a gong.
As soon as I have the gong, I might gong and kiss, and it's going to be a double.
Oh my God.
Whammy, whammy, whammy. Stop!
We need an embargo on gongs. They come from China. I think there's an embargo thing going on.
Oh, I'll find a gong. I don't care where they're from. I'll gong my ass off. You wait and see.
Damn it. We're not gonna stop.
Are you gonna get the hiccups?
No, I'm not gonna get the hiccups.
I can't believe you haven't got the hiccups while we're doing this yet.
Why? It's not a thing. I don't get hiccups.
You get the hiccups.
I'm afraid to, because you become a sociopathic killer when I have hiccups.
So I become a sociopathic killer.
I don't know. It was just the first words that came
right.
out.
No.
It drives you nuts when I get the hiccups.
It drives me nuts when anyone gets the hiccups, including myself. So.
Okay. Well, so all right, let's talk about a journalist.